Hello and welcome to Gimme a Whole Year. I'm Ant.
And I'm Stu.
I'm Ant.
And I'm Stu.
Where's Dom?
Who knows?
Dom couldn't be here today. We've had a little bit of conflicting schedules with my work and his work. So today, instead of doing the normal Wrestling Rewind episode, we're going to do a special episode which looks at the history of anti-American heels within wrestling, not just WWF. So we've gone as far back as the 30s and done a lot of research on different wrestlers. Hopefully, some of it's quite interesting. Some of it's really shocking, actually.
Yeah,
and one thing,
yeah.
before we sort of move on to that, is that there is a lot of really shocking and a lot of racist stuff that happens in this. That's not to say we agree with it. It would just giving.
No, not at all. We don't condone any of it. But
absolutely not. No. So tell us a little bit about you, Stu. Wrestling. What's your history with wrestling?
Obviously, we used to watch it as children. We used to wrestle together many times. I remember you doing many DDTs on me. I remember that chair being hit over my head many times. The red plastic chair, which we broke. You hit it over my head that many times.
Yeah.
I enjoyed wrestling as a youngster. Obviously, don't watch it as much over the last few years, but yeah, I'd still enjoy it.
What was your favorite? Who was your favorite wrestler when you was younger?
Of all time, it'd have to be Rikishi. Big fan of Rikishi. Yeah, big fan of Rikishi.
Interesting. Do you know who Rikishi was before he was Rikishi?
I don't. I only remember him as Rikishi.
I think he was one of the head shrinkers in a tag team. Quite interesting, yeah.
Very interesting.
And also related to one of the people that's made it onto the list of anti-American heels, which is Yokozuna, who we're going to go on to a bit later on.
Yep.
So, any concussion shots from the chair shots to the head, or are you feeling...
I don't think I'm all there, but I don't think I've ever been all there. So, yeah. Can't blame you for that one, can I?
Well, you can try. So, first of all, we're going to look at Alibaba. So, Alibaba, whose real name was Artin Ezekiel, was born in the port of Samson in 1901. So that's sort of as far back as we're going. And this guy is credited as being one of the first anti-American heels, so having that gimmick and it being an anti-American heel. So let's have a look at a little bit about his history, because his history is fascinating. A bit like Bruno Sammartino, who we've talked about in the past, who... If you watch the Legends with JBL episode, he goes into the stuff that happened during the war. This guy had very similar experiences within that, and it's incredible actually that he ended up becoming a heel after. If it had happened today, with the story that he had, which we'll go into in a second, he'd easily be a babyface because they'd play off that, you know.
Yeah.
So when the Armenian Genocide began, Artin was 14 years old. And over 1 million Armenians died in this genocide. It was the worst genocide of this...
Terrible.
Do you call the war a genocide?
I believe you could, yes. Yeah.
I don't know the definition of a genocide. I don't know. Possibly. Anyway, it was the worst one that the Armenians had. Yeah. It was over 1 million people died. In later accounts, he'd talk about the genocide and he'd talk about how he'd see people being beheaded in the streets like chickens, which is pretty rough stuff, you know, to think about. This is real life, you know, this isn't just a story or just a film. This guy had a really tough upbringing. He'd later find out that his father had been hung in the genocide and his brother died of starvation on the way to hide into a cave. He used to wrap his mother's hair on his wrists whenever they slept together, and this was so that she'd keep close to him and he wouldn't lose her on a night. One night, she got out, he didn't realise, and he never saw his mother again.
Sad.
Awful stuff, man. And this is a guy that ended up getting booed by thousands of people.
Yeah.
He was sold into slavery until he escaped about 4 years later. And his uncle was the one that helped him escape. I believe he owned a tobacco company or something that had send stuff to the United States, so his uncle had a bit of influence in that and managed to help him get across to the States. So during his 2 years where he served in the US Navy is where he took up wrestling. So here's a guy who's survived a terrible genocide, gone into the Navy for 2 years, and then he becomes a heel wrestler with what are them things called?
Top bun.
A what, sorry?
Top bun?
No, not a top bun. No, the thing that Tommy Cooper used to wear.
I can't remember now.
It'll come to us in a second. He appeared in a couple of movies early on in this time. He appeared in Island of Lost Souls and The Man on the Flying Trapeze, along with Toru Johnson, who we've talked about before, and he was the wrestler that was in Plan 9 from Outer Space, directed by Edward, who was later portrayed by George the Animal Steele. So, just a little bit of history on how it all sort of comes around and how wrestlers end up playing wrestlers in adaptations of stuff and stuff like that. So he'd wrestle in carnivals and small-time wrestling promotions, finding his feet. But in 1936, he was in a match with over 7,000 spectators that would see Alibaba complete with his fez. That's what it was called. Yep. A moustache and his foreign look, which had become iconic. And one of the things about early heels at this time was that, and part of the reason I think that they probably worked better in this time, you didn't have TV promos, people couldn't watch TV. All it was posters. So if you had a poster with someone with an automatic anti-American heel look, it was really easy to promote the show.
Yep.
And it was really easy to define when people went to the show who was the good guy and who was the bad guy.
Yep.
So for the first time in 1936, we had a babyface American against a foreign heel, and that's what solidified him as a threat. When he won the heavyweight world championship, it wasn't actually recognised in New York because they couldn't accept that he'd won it. So he actually went to New York. I believe it was Madison Square Garden. He went to New York and had to win it there for the New York press to recognise that he'd actually won the championship because they refused to recognise it. And he was praised for his grapple wrestling, which was very much the style of the time. If you go back and watch some of these matches, some of them can go on for over an hour.
Yep.
It's not wrestling like we see today with high flying and slams. It's a lot of grappling, but he was praised for it at the time.
I'd say it's more aerobic these days than it was in them days.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
That's more the old style American wrestling as opposed to what you get nowadays.
Yeah, well, it was sport mixed with... It was a sport of wrestling mixed with... A contrived outcome, if you like.
Yeah.
It was actually done, I believe, in France in the late 1800s. People were actually betting on wrestling, and so wrestling came about as a way of like fixing fights.
Yes.
So as opposed to like boxing, which would be a genuine sport, wrestling was one where the bookmakers could make money because they'd know what
the outcome was going to be.
Yeah, well, if you've got better odds on one person, you can say that person wins, and the bookies are making money, isn't it? Yeah. He also killed people in the ring. He actually killed someone in the ring.
Wow.
Yeah, a guy called Tex Wright, and it was a few days after the match. He was wrestling at the time not as Alibaba, but as Ali Yumed. They changed the name a lot of the time, varying on the promotions that they was in.
Yep.
And he collapsed and died after the match.
Wow.
And it was revealed in an autopsy later on that he shouldn't have been wrestling because he had a heart condition, which was myocarditis, which is an inflammation of the heart muscle. So it shouldn't have been wrestling. Obviously, nowadays the WWE has so many health guards in place that had never happened. But back then, people were doing what they loved.
Yeah, sheer bad luck.
Yeah. One of the things in a later on newspaper article that I read, he held no animosity of the Turks for what had happened in the Armenian Genocide, which a lot of people,
a lot of people hold that against them for life.
Understandably as well.
Yeah.
So that was Alibaba. So before you talk about your first wrestler, I just want to give a massive shout out to Dav, who is a friend of ours who was going to do the podcast in your place and helped with a lot of the research on this episode. So thank you very much, dude. It is much appreciated. If you want to go on to Ivan Rasputin.
Yes, Ivan Rasputin. Great name, if you ask me. Absolutely love that name.
It sounds evil.
It sounds evil, but it also sounds like it could be a character on Street Fighter.
Absolutely, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Is that what you thought when you first saw the name?
Well, I thought of Ayukin. You know when they did the move? And you say, hey, Ayukin, I kind of said it in my mind like, Rasputin. Same way, that's how I was saying it. So, I absolutely love the name. So this guy was born in Chelsea, Massachusetts, as Hyman Fishman. And his nickname was the Mad Russian. His finisher was the bear hug.
Oh, really? Man, I hate a bear hug finisher.
Yes, I suppose he's an old-style wrestler, though, as well, so it's a kind of limitations as to what they was used to as well.
Yeah, you're not getting a coup de grace.
No, he's certainly not. he was a 2-time NWA San Francisco Pacific Coast heavyweight champion, which, is no mean feat at all.
No.
He was one of the original Soviet bad guys, although has legitimate Soviet roots, as his forefathers moved from the Ukraine.
Right.
So a typical heel look to him. So kind of fit in again. That's his second on the list, as I say.
And sort of fitting in with his foreign stereotypes.
Yeah, very much so. It seems to be that way. He's not the American hero that they like to see. Americans have the hero every time, and it's a similar look and it's a similar performance.
Yeah.
Whereas all the heels, like you say, they come from either a Soviet background or a different background to what they used to.
Yeah.
He had that typical look. He had the big beard, broad shoulders, hair everywhere. He was quite a small guy, believe it or not. Reminds me a bit of Taz in stature.
Oh, right, okay, is that small?
Is that small? Slugfest, arm bars, slow and methodical.
Yeah, as the wrestling was at the time.
Yeah. And he was always billed from Los Angeles or Hollywood, California.
Really?
Yeah,
right.
Always billed from there. Interesting fact that. But he was actually banned in the 1940s from wrestling in Pariah. I believe I'm saying that right. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's right. For a fight in the car park of a basket case tavern due to a throwing a chair into the crowd.
Wow.
So yeah. You wouldn't get that nowadays, would you? I mean,
all the time. Well, I mean,
not to that level
are constantly in
banned.
bar fights and stuff like that. I don't know. Nowadays, you don't necessarily get banned. What you do is you get punished. So,
True.
If you look at the mop angle that a wrestler had in the past, it's they get punished. And there's wrestlers are people, man. Ultimately.
Yeah. Ultimately, and they're going to be targets as well.
Yeah. Because people like to challenge them. Yeah,
they do. Yes, they do. He actually broke his back and blinded, but still went in the ring, believe it or not. So he actually broke his back at one point,
right,
and still went into the ring, which is crazy, really.
Yeah, there was no sort of health. If you could make it into the ring, they'd have you do something.
Yeah, but yeah, that's Ivan Rasputin.
Very good.
As it say.
Very good. So next up, we've got Frederick Von Shacked. Now, Frederick Von Shacked is an interesting wrestler. He was born in Milwaukee, is it? Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So he's a USA resident, right? That's what I'm trying to say about this. He was from USA. He was a wrestler who, in 1939, went from a Prussian gimmick, so the old sort of Russian, German gimmick used a lot of the time, to that of a Nazi. And this was 1939, 2 years before America went to war with Germany.
Yeah. Never going to end well after that, is it?
Well, it certainly caused a bit of a stir at the time, as you can imagine. So he'd wear an iron cross as he entered the ring, and he'd also do a Nazi salute, which is mental to think about. It caused several riots at wrestling rings and mob attacks where he'd have to be rescued by the police. Really, you would hate him, and there's another Nazi on the list as well. But this is the earliest, and this was at a time when that was bad, man.
That's bad moves.
That was bad.
Yeah. So I certainly wouldn't be doing it.
You wouldn't be doing it. No, wouldn't be doing it. Certain promotions have put 15 police around ringside to keep the fans from rioting. Ironically, this is interesting. In 1942, he was enlisted into the US Army. So he spent a bit of time in England and a bit of time abroad helping fight the Nazis, which is what his gimmick was all about.
Turned it right round, didn't he, there?
Yeah.
180.
After the war, he dropped the Nazi gimmick a little bit and went back into the Prussian Crusher. But he'd fight people like Lou Thez and Freddie Blassie and people like that later on when they were very young, And I watched a match with him fighting a very young Freddie Blassie. It's available on YouTube. So next up,
the Von Bruners,
okay.
the original Menace tag team. The tag team stable consisting of evil German twins from the 50s to the 70s. There was numerous versions of the team who won 35 world tag team titles between them.
It's a lot. That's recognition.
It's recognition.
But they'd get booked because they were easy to sell.
Yes, yeah, very much so. Like you say, it comes back to that poster child, doesn't it? For the good guys, the bad guys.
Yep.
You need them. It's the same in this day and age, really. You need good guys, you need bad guys within the entertainment.
Yeah, to an extent. There's a couple of times where we've had great face versus face matches, like Hulk Hogan versus Ultimate Warrior, and stuff like that. But it is very rare, and there's more grey in the WWF nowadays. But this is easy to sell: bad guy, good guy, and with no story needed before it. It's just easy.
Yes. So the original was Kurt and Karl, known as Jimmy Broner's parents, was originally from Germany and spoke the accent. Adds legitimacy to the act.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And Doug Donovan suggested they work together as they resembled each other.
Right. That happens a lot, even in the 80s, even nowadays, actually. If you look at Dash and Dawson, the Revival, and things like that, they're not actually related, but look quite similar. An even better example would be the Authors of Pain, who look very similar. I don't believe they're related at all.
Christian Edge as well, was they related?
No, they weren't related.
Again,
similar. Especially when they was in the Brood, very long hair and vampire makeup.
So it was paired with manager gentleman Saul Wengenhoff, who came in with an immaculate suit with his cane, often caused riots. Somehow. And had to have police escorts before and after matches.
Yeah. Mad to think about, really.
Yeah, it really is. So, but in 1965, Jimmy left. Doug's, which was the real brother, joined as Eric von Brunner, aka Don. When Don retired in the late 1960s, they were joined by a new Kurt von Brunner, played by Willy Rudkowski, who was also born in Germany.
Cool.
Wagenhoff would often get the attention of the referees so that the Von brothers could swap places, twin magic.
So the Bellas twin magic, and also what we've been talking about in the Wrestling Rewind series was the Killer Bees did a similar sort of thing. So because they look so similar, that instead of tagging, they'd make it so one of them went out the ring, the other one went in, so there was no legal tag, but the referee think that it happened.
Yes, very much so. And like I say, it worked as they look similar. And this didn't go down well with the crowd, as you can imagine. So they was absolutely fuming with these with what was happening. They would also spew anti-American rhetoric, and even against other heel teams, they were often the most despised. So even if they came up against another heel team, crowds hated them.
They were the more heelish.
They was hated. That's where we leave it with that one.
Great. So next up, we've got Hans Schmidt, who was born in Quebec, Canada, so French-Canadian.
Yes.
Real name was Guy Smith, not Hans Schmidt.
Hans Schmidt's way cooler.
Wait until you find out where he got the name from, or potentially got the name from. So the origins of the name is unclear. It potentially could have been taken from a Buchenwald defendant of the same name. So this was a bloke that was an attendant at a concentration camp who was called Hans Schmidt.
Not such a cool name now.
Not such a cool name anymore. Well, it could have been the other reason. The other guy that it could have been taken, who was also called Hans Schmidt, whose name was in the press at the time, was a Catholic priest who murdered and dismembered a young girl and had been in the press all at the time. Wow. Which would you prefer to be?
I choose a different name altogether.
Well, yeah, I mean, you choose a name like that, and it's instant heat. So because it's already in the audience's mind,
and this is why he was a heel straight away. It's what you've got to do, isn't it? You either go for one option or the other.
Yeah. So he was a massive wrestler. He wrestled for many years, and he put on some incredible fights actually. And he had an evil German gimmick. It never went as far in the early days as the Nazi salute and stuff like that. But he was still massively hated by the US crowd at this time. I mean, this is sort of 50s, 60s, 70s time. He was really great in interviews, so he'd do interviews with the press, and he'd always talk in German. And I was reading a great press review where there was writing it in German as well. So he'd say things like, "I'm going to win the title and take it back to Germany where it belongs," which is, brilliant. He used to use a lot of kicks in the ring, so he used to use his legs a lot more than other wrestlers. And he was known for being a stiff worker, which earned him the nickname Footsie. in the locker room. So working stiff is basically where the wrestlers are actually hurting people. So he was a stiff worker. He'd often attack the referees, cheat, and not stand up for the national anthem when that had happened at the start of matches. All basic heel gimmicks. These are used by other wrestlers, but this was one of the first times. It wasn't the first time that gimmick was done, but he really embodied it and really
pushed it to another
level.
It.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, and became really popular as well, Schmidt, for his work, because he was a good worker and people knew that he was good. His finisher was a backbreaker, which is way better than a bear hug at least.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And he'd fight the likes of Luthez, Pat O'Connor, Jack Briscoe, so really massive deal. Top of the card of these events, easy to sell. It's similar to like Iron Sheik versus Hogan and Slaughter Hogan. It was really, really, really up there. He'd incite riots at wrestling matches. Which
love a good riot, don't they?
Back then, there was a lot of riots. Later on, the guys... I can't think of any riots Kevin Owens has started yet, but these guys were starting some riots. Fans really hated him, and they'd write into the press as well, talking about how much they hated him as well, which is good. That's the way that you get fans invested in stuff.
It is, yeah.
If fans invested enough to write something.
Yeah, and
it's great.
It's not like nowadays where there's social media where anyone can write anything. Effectively, anyone could do this.
Absolutely,
It's the same principle. They really had to go out the way to try and get their word out if they wanted to.
Yeah, and you had to go out of your way a lot more than you do nowadays.
Yeah, definitely.
According to an old manager, he had 3 cars destroyed on separate nights due to riots before the mounted police could control the riots. This was mainly in the Canada area. And as the world changed around the 60s, 70s, 80s time, the Germans were no longer the biggest threat. It was the Russians that was the biggest threat then. And so he was actually fighting for like the Volcoff brothers that we'll go into a little bit later on.
Yep.
So to counteract this, what he'd do is he actually took the gimmick at this point a little bit further. So I actually posted a photo of him on Facebook. So he'd wear an iron German helmet and he'd start doing the Nazi salute and stuff to try and keep the heat going.
Yeah.
So next up...
Fabulous Kangaroos.
The Fabulous Kangaroos. Where are those from?
Well, existed in various forms between the late 50s and the early 80s, and they was formed by Italian and Australian Al Costello and Australian Roy Heffman.
Yeah, so this is interesting. So this is Australian heels, which is something that seems a bit strange, but these were foreign menaces, anti-American. There's another big one down the list that we'll get to in a second, but I find it strange that you'd have Australians as heels because they don't have that history.
They don't have that history.
It's the Pacific that was helping America during the war and stuff like that.
But then if he came in and if an Australian went into the American wrestling back then and tried to be a good guy, it wouldn't really work, would it?
I don't know. I mean, it wasn't much long after. We've got another team, but if you look at like Butch and Luke, the Bushwhackers, they were loved by WWF fans, and that was only in the 80s, so it's not too far away. It's just, for whatever reason, these heels existed, anti-American heels.
So yeah, there was Ultra Australians, boomerangs, bush hats, waltzing Matilda's entrance.
So it was Crocodile Dundee.
Oh yeah, very much so. Right. Really, really going for it. Yeah. They would throw cardboard boomerangs into the crowd on the entrance and wave a huge Australian flag.
Mental.
Yeah. Just what you want to do in America. They near enough caused a riot at Madison Square Gardens in 1958. Crowd threw stones and fruit at them. Had to play the American national anthem to calm them down. They love a good anthem, don't they, the Americans?
Yeah, that'll sort them out.
Sort them out. Just play the anthem.
Yeah, and everyone will stop, sing, and put the hand on their ear.
Yeah, that's what happens. Yeah, shut them up. Quick, play the anthem. They also caused a riot at an event in Ohio where they spat in the eye of a local wrestler, causing the crowd to rush them.
Right.
I'm not sure I'd have done that.
No, it's risky.
Very risky if it's a local wrestler and he's liked around them areas and you go and do something like that. It's not the best move.
There's wrestlers nowadays who do have a go in the crowd, especially more at house shows. And Kevin Owens is another anti-American heel at the minute that we'll talk about later on. But he had a massive exchange with a fan. There's a really funny video, actually. You should check it out. It was earlier last year. Kevin Owens had Roman Reigns in a submission, and he was basically bad-mouthing this fan while he was in the submission. You can see Roman Reigns absolutely pissing himself. He was basically telling him how much he earned and how much he's paid to come to the show and stuff like that. Yeah. Brilliant, really good stuff.
Gotta love it.
Sorry, let's go back to the Kangaroos.
Yes, so after spitting in the eye of the local wrestler, they had to actually hide in a dumpster overnight.
Oh, really?
To get away from the crowd. So not a good night's sleep after that, after all. Costello had a fire extinguisher thrown at him, which hit him on the hip, causing it to have to be replaced as well that night. So yeah, that was a really bad move in the end, spitting in the eye of a local wrestler.
Yeah, it sounds like a bad night.
There was one of the first teams to really popularise tag team wrestling, as tag team was known as Australian rules. Mm-hmm. Roots were in Canada, though. They wrestled in many different territories. In the early 90s, Al Costello began managing the new fabulous Kangaroos on the indie circuit, Al Snow.
Oh, right, okay.
And the finishing move was the boomerang, a catapult into a KO punch. I like the name of it.
I can't imagine.
I don't know how it works, but I like the name. I like the name of it. Just
right, okay.
I don't think
the boomerang.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It
sounds so aggressive.
It's fitting though with what they are. I mean, the name's not exactly aggressive, is it? The fabulous Kangaroos.
No, I suppose not. The Sheephearders are next up. So before there were Bushwhackers, Luke and Butch were known as the Sheephearders, and this was when there was wrestling in the territories a lot more. There was even known as the Sheepherders or the Kiwi Sheepherders.
Kiwi Sheepherders?
Yeah, so again, we've got another New Zealand, Australia. Well, these were from New Zealand, but another sort of Australian heel menace, which I just find obscure, because Australians are like, Home and Away have like all the surfer dudes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But they're not bad people.
No, but Australia and New Zealand are two different countries.
Yeah, I suppose. But even so, they're all good people.
They're all next to each other.
The only bad people that are from New Zealand were in The Lord of the Rings. That's all I can think of.
Yeah. They're just always happy and smiling, what I see.
I say Lord of the Rings, I mean... Yeah. So the style during this time had been much more aggressive than when there was Luke and Butch. Do you remember Luke and Butch?
I don't know.
They used to come in with they'd have like camo pants on, and they'd go like that, and then they'd start licking the audience.
No, I don't recall that.
Oh yeah, Luke and Butch, classic tag team of the WWF. Never really did much so, actually, which I'll go into in a second. So the style during the time, so this is before there was in WWF, it was much more aggressive, and there was often blood in the matches. I went back and watched one of the fights, and it was a really bloody match compared to anything that was happening in WWF at the time, or certainly on TV at the time.
Yeah.
They won many tag team championships in the territories, but never actually won the WWF championship, which is probably because when they come in, they came in as these silly faces almost. So there was fighting the bad guys, but they weren't really taken seriously as wrestlers, and
they didn't push the boundaries enough, shall we say?
No, and you've got to remember that the baby faces at the time were people like Demolition and the Hart Foundation and the Rockers, and they were never going to be as good as them. However, I think after watching a couple of their matches, if they'd come in as the Sheepherders and with this. Because one of the problems that I think Demolition had and Hart Foundation is that they didn't really have many good heel tag teams to fight.
No.
You could argue the Rougeaus at one point were talented, but not necessarily a really hated heel team or anything like that. No. I think that it would have been really interesting to see them instead of this comedy throwaway characters. Because they was inducted into the Hall of Fame, but there's no British Bulldogs in the Hall of Fame yet. There's no Hart Foundation. There's no Demolition. There's no Rockers. There's no Steiner Brothers. So there's all these sort of tag teams which are massive, and these are in it. And one of the arguments that people, because it caused a bit of a fuss at the time, people were like, why are these going in before these? And a lot of the arguments were talking about the Sheepherder days and saying, look, back then there was the tag team, heel tag team. So I think they probably should have entered the WWF as heels, and it would have been good to have them fighting against teams like Demolition, Hart Foundation, Rockers. It would have been really good, I think, but never happened. Wasn't to be.
Oh, it's a shame, but next on the list is another Ivan. It's Ivan, I believe I'm saying this right, Koloff.
Ivan Koloff, yeah.
Ivan Koloff. Yeah. I had trouble with that one earlier, so I did ask numerous times how I said it, but I still forget.
Try saying Paul Orndorff. I always get it wrong, man.
This guy was actually born in Canada, but he always put on a Russian accent, which drew tremendous heat from the crowd, as you can imagine.
Oh, yeah.
So every time he spoke, he'd get boos and cheers. They just did not like him for his accent. And they say Canadian. But it is what it is. He's obviously trying to be a heel. He gained that straight away by putting on that accent.
Yeah. Easy stuff, really.
Easy.
He's a good wrestler as well, Koloff.
Yeah. So he wrestled with all the top names, including Andre the Giant.
Yeah.
Just to name one. And he was known as the Russian Bear. Mm-hmm. So he was best known for once holding the WWF World Heavyweight Championship.
Yep.
In 1967. He was managed by Captain Lou.
Captain Lou
Albino, yes, in the WWF. Best known for his rivalry with the great Bruno.
Bruno Sammartino.
Yeah. So, and he actually shockingly beat him.
So this was massive, actually, because Bruno Sammartino is recognised as the longest ever holding WWF. 8 years.
8 years, and
he was the one that ended that, which was massive at the time. But he didn't keep it for very long, did he?
No, but it's a huge honour to obviously be able to do that.
Absolutely.
To do that.
Well, I think Bruno actually, he needed a break at the time. He'd been wrestling a lot, and he'd sort of said to Vince McMahon Sr., I need a break. This guy's really good, and he can sort of take over. And I think Bruno thought that it was going to be a really good step up for him.
Yep.
But he didn't keep it for very long.
21 days.
21 days.
3 weeks.
Yeah.
You go on holidays longer than that.
You do. You do. And this is in a day when it's not on TV every day.
Yeah, but it was effectively a transitional champion until they could decide who they really wanted.
Yes.
It was effectively a stepping stone until they had more time.
I can't remember who was next after him.
Pedro Morales.
Pedro Morales, right, okay.
So, but yes, they challenged fan favourites of the 70s superstar Billy Graham and Bob Backlund.
Bob Backlund, yeah.
Often use a chain as a weapon. Everyone loves a chain.
Yeah, it's heel tactics, isn't it? Bring a weapon to the ring, you're a bad guy.
Straight away. He was a first wrestler in a steel cage with Sammartino as well.
Oh, was he? Right, okay. No, I didn't know that. No.
It's interesting. He moved to the NWA and found success as the Russians in the 80s, winning numerous tag team titles. Nikita Koloff, which is the Kayfabe nephew, and Crusher. Kayfabe nephew, and the Crusher Khrushchev only passed away in February of this year.
Oh, right.
And many current legends paid tribute to him and said how much they learnt from him. So I suppose it goes to show a lot from him.
It was a big deal.
He was a great worker apparently, and he popped up in the WCW and the ECW as well.
Oh, did he? Right, okay. So, careful with that table banging. Sorry for everyone with headphones on.
Sorry, guys.
Right, so next up we've got Iron Sheik. So classic heel. We've talked about him a little bit. He was in WrestleMania 1. Camel Clutch was a devastating submission. 1984 time in his feuds with Hulk Hogan, really helped sell Hulk Hogan right from the start. Iron Sheik was actually from Iran, and he competed to be in the wrestling team for the 1968 Summer Olympics. And then he was the assistant coach for the US team in the 1972 Olympic Games. And he had an incredible look, the Iron Sheik. So iconic. You can tell who he is instantly. And it was partly because the Iranian Revolution, which started in 1979, so this is just before the Sheik became sort of a mass. No, because he was wrestling before then, but in his feud with Hogan was shortly after that, or a couple of years after that, and it was that helped him gain so much heat.
Yeah.
Something like that happens in the world, and we're coming to a couple of points now where there's a couple of wrestlers who something in the world impacted how much heat they gained.
I guess it was unfortunate timing more than anything, or fortunate in terms of them became the heel, which then.
In certain, he was always a heel. In certain cases, it's fortunate. In certain cases, it's unfortunate.
Yes,
in the Iron Sheiks, I'd say it was definitely fortunate. Yep. He had a really long career that I think ended earlier this year.
Yep.
But will probably have another retirement match next year because that's what the Iron Sheiks like. He was the WWF champion in 1984, who defeated Bob Buckland. Another American face, and he held the championship. I believe he was the third longest after Sammartino, Hulk Hogan, and then it was Buckland. So, and it was the Sheik who Hogan beat for his first championship. So he wasn't just a transitional champion. I don't think we can call him that, but he was there between the Bob Buckland babyface and the Hogan first run as the championship, and we all know how massive an American Hogan was.
Yeah, he was basically the all-American hero, wasn't he? Effectively,
the real American.
Real American.
Later on, he teamed with other anti-American heels in our Wrestling Rewind series. We talked a little bit about that because he was teaming with Nikolai Volkoff in the stuff that we're watching, forming the Foreign Legion, and he won the WWF Tag Team Championships at WrestleMania 1. Done a video on all that. Go check it out. He was a top tier heel of the 80s boom in wrestling, and that 80s boom is the reason that we have mainstream wrestling like we do today. Really, because them guys
really took off, wasn't it? Really.
Well, them guys made it happen, you know. And ultimately, that's why he's potentially one of the best anti-American heels.
Before that, like you say, it was more grappling. There's a lot more grappling, whereas the moves kind of improved by that point. And
I mean, Sheik's camel clutch as well was so associated with anti-American gimmicks as well. Nobody kicked out with that for a long time. I think we covered it in a previous episode. So if you want to find out who was the first person to break out the camel clutch, you can find out there. And he's still very active on Twitter today. Obviously, it's Twitter.
Not going to tell you which one though, so you have to watch every single one.
There we go. So next up, we've got Volcoff.
Someone who you just touched on, as you say, Nikolai Volkoff. Nikolai was actually his middle name. It wasn't his first name.
It was, yeah.
But he's best known for teaming up with, as you just said, the Iron Sheik. And he won various tag team titles, first at WrestleMania, and also, as I remember him, with Boris Zhukev as Bolsheviks.
Oh, right, okay, there's the Bolsheviks, yeah.
Originally trained by Stu Hart, originally a bodybuilder who emigrated to the US. Feuds with, again, this guy Sammartino and Bob Backless.
Bob Buckland, yeah.
Managed by Bobby Heenan and Captain Lou Albano in the early days.
I mean, Bobby Heenan, as we've gone through a few times, one of the best heel managers of all time.
He seems to do the rounds in them years. He was, you know, he knew the storyline. He knew how to portray him. He knew
how to take a bump as well.
He did,
which is important.
And he was often given the heavyweight title matches, but without winning.
Yeah. It was a foil for Hogan or whoever was a champion at the time. Yeah, which was generally Hogan.
Yeah, he used to one of his shall we say party tricks was actually to go into the ring and crush an apple with his hands.
Oh right, okay.
So he'd go,
I didn't see him do that.
No, apparently he used to do that. It's quite cool.
He used to come out to the ring, and this is part of his gimmick. He'd always used to sing the national anthem, and the crowd would be booing all the way through it. Yeah.
But he really pushed the envelope back in the 80s with the Iron Sheik. Like I say, singing the national anthem, spitting after mentioning the name USA.
Yeah.
Again, that's never going to go down well, is it?
But it works. It helps sell the babyface, you know.
Exactly. And proclaiming Russia and Iran number one.
Yeah.
He was again managed by the classy Freddie Brizzy.
Classy Freddie Blassie. If Russia and Iran are number one, who's the actual real number one? Because he can't have two number ones. That defies the point.
I don't think he can. I think he just liked to wind people up.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah, it did. Yeah,
like I say, he's on this list for a reason, so it obviously worked. Wrestling back singly after they lost the tag team titles. Wrestling Hulk Hogan numerous times, including a flag on a pole match. Yeah. In the second ever Saturday Night's main event. So that's,
Didn't know it was then, right?
Yeah, so, but yes.
Flag on a pole match, and a truly awful concept.
To
be perfectly honest, rubbish, as seen with the...
It didn't last that long, did it?
They redid one at the last pay-per-view. I think it was Battleground, and it was John Cena versus Rusev in a flag match, and it was frigging awful.
Yeah, it's not good.
No.
In 1987... teamed up with American-born wrestler James Harrell, aka Boris Zhukev.
Zhukev, yeah.
Many losses. just always.
But you need that guy, and the thing about him is he was reliable for the company to go back on. He was very much a staple, a bit like Greg Valentine. You know?
He didn't make much fuss behind the scenes, and he did what he needed to do on the scene effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
drew in the crowds, played the heel, and did what he was told.
Yeah,
exactly what you need. He was used as a comic relief team, notably against the Bushwhackers.
Yeah.
In 1990 by singing Star Spangled Banner at Boris.
Yeah.
Became pro-West and liberated, feuding with Sergeant Slaughter, who in turn had teamed up with Colonel Mustafa, who was the Iron Sheik.
Yeah, so that was an interesting sort of crossover when Volcoff became more of the face and passed on the heel to Sergeant Slaughter, who couldn't. Yeah. I'll get into Sergeant Slaughter, but he wouldn't respect that the Americans had accept Volcoff, so that was sort of how they initially turned Sergeant Slaughter heel.
Yeah. So, he was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2005. Made sporadic appearances in skits, usually singing the Soviet national anthem.
Yeah,
as you do. So, a very interesting character.
He was, iconic, definitely. Yeah. You know who he is when you see him.
Yeah, and it justified him why he's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, absolutely. So. Toru Tanaka is our next wrestler, who was born in Honolulu.
Over there in Hawaii.
And he was drafted into the US Army in 1955 for 4 years. It's great to see all these anti-American heels who have worked for the US Army. So he was billed as being from Japan, not Hawaii, because a Hawaii heel was deemed as not threatening.
Yes.
So Hawaii is too similar to America, apparently.
Yeah.
One of his major gimmicks at the start of the match was to throw salt into the corners of the ring, and the end of the match would often end with him throwing the salt into the eyes of the opponent.
Just to keep spirits out, you know?
Yeah, to keep spirits out, yeah, of course, yeah. So it's similar to Mr. Fuji in many respects. His style incorporated wrestling with his martial arts background as well. And it was Bruno Sammartino who recommended him to Vince McMahon Sr. to get him into the WWF at the time. So Bruno had a lot of sway within the company. He was a champion for 8 years. Massive wrestler at that time. It was one of the first evil foreigners from Japan. We'll go into another evil foreigner from Japan in a bit. He occasionally teamed with Gorilla Monsoon, but also Mr. Fuji, who we all know as the manager from the 80s. When he was wrestling, he was teaming with him. His feuding with Sammartino in the 60s made him, again, one of the top heels on the card. If you was fighting Sammartino, you was at the top of the card.
Yeah.
And he also appeared in Running Man. Do you know the film with Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Yeah, with Arnold Schwarzenegger, yeah.
Do you know the other wrestler who appeared
was
in
that? Was he playing as the goalkeeper then?
He was,
He was the goalkeeper,
He was. The ice skating
goalkeeper, yeah.
That's right, yeah. The other wrestler that appeared in that was, I think he was an agent in it or something like that, was Jesse the Body Ventura, who was a commentator in the 80s.
Okay,
yeah. So, and he had an interesting time, actually. I think we just covered in our Wrestling Rewind series when he came back from filming The Running Man, because he actually left on quite bad terms with Vince.
Yeah.
He died of a heart failure in 2000, and they had a full military funeral in his honour. So I just find it so interesting that these guys who served in the US Navy, who
effectively heroes to the country, and then they were stepping a wrestling ring and
ultimate heel. Brilliant.
Yeah. Gotta love it how they pick them.
Yeah, absolutely. So next, do you want to go Ludwig Borga?
Yep, Ludwig Borga, from Finland.
Right.
Finnish wrestler, which you don't get many of those.
Finnish heel, yeah.
Finnish heel.
Oh, Finland. I might embarrass myself here. I think Alistair Black's from Finland.
Really?
Yeah. Maybe.
Did not know that.
I might have to check it up.
Research it. Let me know.
Let me know how wrong I am.
He had wrestled in the New Japan Pro Wrestling before WWF in 1993. So he'd obviously been trying to make it to the top prior to that. He's obviously willing to travel to do what he can. And he obviously made it into WWF in 1993, as just stated. Originally appeared in forgive me for this, the vignettes criticising Americans for the defences and environmental laws and educational system.
Right.
So he's gone
vignettes,
away from anything else, and he's attacking everyday life in America.
Right. Okay. Interesting anti-American heel.
Yeah. Very interesting.
You're attacking America's basic principles. Is what you're doing. Yeah. You're not just attacking the country. You're actually pinpointing it on something.
You are. His entrance was the Finnish national anthem. Fitting.
Yeah.
Tights adorned with a flag.
Right. Okay. So, Finnish flag.
Yeah. He wanted everyone to know he was from Finland.
No, you knew he was from Finland. Yeah. You got told.
You got told he was from Finland. So, but yeah, he was immediately pushed to the main event status to feud with Lex Luger. Yep. Yeah. Who had made in the USA gimmick.
Yeah, sort of took over Hogan after Hogan had left. Luger first come in as a heel, didn't really work. His character work he's a really weird wrestler. I'm looking forward to talking about him in Wrestling Rewind, especially his introduction stuff, because it was first off the narcissist Lex Luger, really interesting. They tried to sell him with the Lex Express. Yep. He was a new American after Hulk Hogan, basically.
Yep.
Was where they wanted him to be.
Yeah, very much so. He actually ended, and again, forgive me for this, but Tatan Cass's undefeated streak.
Tatan Cass. He did. No idea who he is.
No, very much so. But teamed up at Survivor Series in a foreign Fanatics team, which included other different wrestlers.
Right, okay.
I'm sorry, I have to leave that one there.
That's all right. That's okay. It's not Tatanka that it's...
Possibly.
It could have been Tatanka's...
undefeated streak. That would make sense.
I can't remember if he had an undefeated streak, but... Cool.
So, yeah. In 1994, after an ankle injury, he was gone. Effectively ended it. And he went into independent wrestling, then mixed martial arts, then political career in Finland.
Okay.
So it was short but sweet.
Yeah.
We say.
Yeah. No, that's
left
cool.
his impression.
Absolutely. I tell you what, I've been really distracted when he was reading that. I was trying to think where Aleister Black was from. He's Dutch.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So forgive me, he's not Finnish. He's Dutch. You don't have to. You can stop writing that comment in the comment. And
too late. It's already been posted.
Well, there we go. Next up is Sergeant Slaughter. So we'll talk a little bit about Sergeant Slaughter, because early on in his career he was a face. He was probably the second biggest face in the company at the time, in about 84, where the only bigger babyface was actually Hulk Hogan. So that's how much of a face he was. He fell out with Vince McMahon over the G.I. Joe toy line.
Yep.
So they wanted to have Sergeant Slaughter as a figure, and Vince wouldn't let it happen, or something like that. Something happened. They fell out. He left the company. Vince called him up and said, I've got a great storyline for you leading up to WrestleMania with Hulk Hogan, and you're going to come back and you're going to be an Iraqi sympathizer. Now, at this time, there was so much going on in the Middle East that this sort of storyline, and it really took off, and that's why Sergeant Slaughter's on the list. Really, it was basically for this Iraqi sympathizer role.
Probably say it's one of the ultimate turns.
Yeah, in a way. I mean, Sergeant Slaughter was a general army man.
He's the all-American hero again.
In a sense, yeah. I mean, I don't. Yeah, he was the military good guy, I suppose.
Yeah.
And very popular for that fact. And here he comes with a Iraqi sympathizer role, and doesn't change that much actually. He teamed up with General Adnan and Colonel Mustafa. So originally it was vignettes where Sergeant Slaughter was annoyed with the American audience for supporting Volcoff.
Yeah.
Then it quickly escalated into the fact that Slaughter liked the brutality that the Iraqi government had, and while the American government was soft and weak, which is really quite harsh stuff to say, especially when your country's about to go to war with Iraq, basically.
Certainly is.
After beating the Ultimate Warrior at the Royal Rumble, Vince took it on himself to move Slaughter's real-life wife out of a home and his family as well because of real life threats.
Yes,
to his family. This is how much the character was over and how much it was hated. This is coming into one of the WrestleManias not long after the sort of wrestling boom, really. So the heat was building up to his WrestleMania match with Hulk Hogan, and it was some massive heat to the point where Slaughter had to wear a bulletproof vest when he went out in public.
Wow.
Just for fear of his life, yeah. So many death threats.
Crazy how some of these stories just grow and grow and grow and can just turn.
Well, at the time, wrestling was still considered real, to a lot of people, and couldn't see the storyline aspect of it, and it was just to work. So he formed allies with the Iron Sheik, Colonel Mustafa, and General Adnan. It was a really dominant faction in wrestling at the time. It was a heel that was sort of captured at just the right time, and then he turned face not long after the feud had ended. I think, in a sense, that WrestleMania they pushed it just a little bit too far, and because of what was happening in the Middle East,
I think they pushed the boundaries at the wrong time. Ultimately, they go for the really, really bad guy. The one whatever's bad at that period in time, they tried to resemble it in some sort of wrestler, and ultimately can have side effects.
Sometimes it can go too far, and that's when they had to step back and turned him into a face again, basically. But to go from such a big face guy to Iraqi sympathiser, that's why I think it's important for us to talk about Sergeant Slaughter in terms of the anti-American heel, because it was a WrestleMania main event, at the time.
Yeah.
So next up, we've got Yokozuna. The Japanese sumo wrestler, really big guy. Check out a photo of him. He moved quite well for a 500-pound guy.
Yeah, not bad. Not bad. Still pretty sluggish.
Yeah, there was. I think it's WrestleMania 10. I want to say, where he wrestles 2 matches. He wrestles one at the. Is it him that wrestles? No, that's Bret Hart. There is a WrestleMania, I'm sure, where he wrestles 2 matches, and you're thinking, God, this probably not the best person to choose to watch 2 matches.
No.
It was hard work. But his family, he was born in San Francisco, California, and he was part of the Samoan American family, the Inoue family, which includes The Rock, Roman Reigns, Umaga, and Rikishi.
Very successful wrestlers you've named there.
A wrestling family, and the Usos now currently from that family. Nia Jax from that family. They've always had a good relationship with the WWF. Rocky Johnson back before The Rock was The Rock's dad. His WWF pay-per-view debut was in 1992 Survivor Series, so check out that Wrestling Rewind. And it was against Virgil.
Wow.
Can you imagine Yokozuna against Virgil? It just absolutely destroy him.
I seem to recall we saw Yokozuna live.
We did, against Undertaker in a casket match.
In a casket match, that's correct.
The whole gimmick of that match was that he'd get pushed into the casket and the casket would explode open. Yeah. Because he couldn't fit into the casket. Yeah. It was a good show.
It certainly was.
Still remember it after, 20 odd years?
20 odd years, 22 years.
Yeah. So he had he beat Bret Hart at WrestleMania and he beat Hulk Hogan at King of the Ring. So this was the first WrestleMania that he'd come into, straight away beating Bret Hart. Massive news. And even though the WrestleMania match was tainted by Hogan's ego, which can't wait to cover that WrestleMania because it's a bit of a weird one. He did win the title at his first WrestleMania. There's not many people that can say that.
No.
His title reign lasted for 280 days. He was a dominant force. The sumo gimmick was new. It was fresh in the WWF at the time. There's no one else like it. And the Banzai Drop, his finishing move, looked devastating. It looked like you could crack his sternum if you did it wrong.
If it went wrong, it could really, really go wrong.
Yeah, because he come off the top rope, landed on his opponent, basically sat on them. If he'd put
big
force
guy
into it,
big guy.
So it looked devastating.
Yeah.
Yokozuna, the name Yokozuna, actually comes from the highest ranking professional sumo in Japan.
Did it really? Right.
That's why the name comes from. So massive Japanese heel, prominent in the WWF in early 90s, 91, 92, 93. I think he was in the Royal Rumble in 93. He wouldn't. I believe he wins the Royal Rumble.
He wins the Royal Rumble. I seem to recall there was many men on him at one point. He managed to knock them all off him.
Yeah, which was a great storyline within that.
The one with
Rumble.
Randy Savage?
Randy Savage is in it. He comes in towards the end. Buckland's in it. Flair's in it. It's a good Rumble, actually.
Yep.
Actually, it's not, but it's fond in my heart.
I think it was the first Royal Rumble I actually saw.
Yeah, it'll be mine. Well, we had it on VHS.
It was the very first one we had, yes.
And we used to play that video to death. Absolutely.
We did, yeah.
So next up, let's talk about Bret Hart.
Bret Hart, yeah. Again, one from our childhood, really. He was a massive babyface, big champion. Everyone loved him. Everyone wanted him to win. And then all of a sudden it turned. WrestleMania 13. During a fight against Stone Cold, it'd be one of the best heel turns of all time, effectively.
Probably,
happening organically during the match. And
that's the nice thing about it. He enters a babyface, Stone Cold enters a heel, and by the end of the match, Stone Cold
completely turned. Yeah,
completely, and it's what spurred on the attitude, big time.
It is, and it's amazing how they turned them both during the same fight.
Yeah,
a
really great story told in the ring.
Yeah, really, really well done.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I say, I was a big fan of Bret Hart growing up. Again, someone we saw at Arena just down the road here.
It's interesting because although I quite like. I know you was a big Bret Hart fan.
Yeah,
watching.
I just used to like his sunglasses. That's what
it was. Great gimmick. Yeah,
great gimmick.
Watching back some of his matches as I have done. There's some good stuff. There's also some not quite as good stuff.
Yes,
everyone praises Bret Hart as a technical wrestler because that's what they were told to praise. In some respects, I think there was more interesting wrestlers out there at the time that just didn't get that.
He got publicised a lot. He was the man. He was the man at the front. He was the one.
He was the face of the company.
Yeah, he was the face of the company. It was really, really well done how they turned it on its head effectively, and really different. But like I said, from that point, the American fans started booing him during that fight. Where obviously he basically turned his back on America and formed a new Hart Foundation with the British Bulldog, Owen Hart, Brian Pillman, and Jim Neidhart.
Yeah. So what was interesting about that whole time is America were booing Bret Hart. Yeah. But Canada and the UK or the rest of Europe, in fact, were all cheering Bret Hart.
Yeah.
And what was really interesting about the Raw SmackDowns at that time is a lot of them were filmed in Canada as well. Yes. Yeah. So you'd get 1 week where the crowd were booing Bret Hart, the next week where they were cheering Bret Hart, which is a great anti-American heel, really.
Oh, definitely.
And because it's between Canada and America and they both feel different about the same person, it led to a really interesting dynamic and a great heel run from a person that was predominantly a babyface.
And he continued to talk about the US in a negative light and continued to advocate the UK and Canada, which obviously went, like you say, how it went like that was booing 1 week, cheering the next week. So it was really well how they did that.
Yeah.
But like I said, constantly vent his disgust at the US, which obviously again it just doesn't go well, does it? Within the for the crowd.
No.
So yeah, Hart ended up winning the WWE title at SummerSlam 1997 in New Jersey, and he rubbed it in the faces of the American people. The heat he gained from this was massive.
It was, yeah. I mean, all of this is sort of the birth of the Attitude Era, really. The handing over the torch from Bret Hart to Stone Cold is a face of a company in many respects.
Yeah, ultimately, yeah. And I mean, unfortunately, this continued. I mean, this continued for a few years, but then unfortunately, it sadly all came to an end when Pillman passed away.
Yeah, Pillman passed away. Yeah, and not just that. WCW offered Bret Hart a lot of money to come to WCW. It's all documented in the I think is it called Behind the Shadows or something like that?
Yeah,
the wrestling documentary. It's a really good watch that documents Bret Hart's leaving from the WWF, including like punching Vince McMahon like backstage for real. And then obviously
never a good idea to punch your boss.
Well, it depends who your boss is, I suppose.
Yeah. But many people have wanted to do it many times.
Yeah, Bret Hart managed to do it. Yeah. But then, you know, the WCW thing happened. Bret Hart left with a Montreal Screwjob, which was one of the biggest works in wrestling history and still talked about today on who was right to do it, who was wrong to do it, and led to the Attitude Era, and the stuff we got in the Attitude Era was fantastic. We was both watching the Attitude Era.
Certainly was, yeah.
And obviously the rest is history, I suppose.
So on to William Regal.
Well, William Regal,
I love to hate, my ad.
You like William Regal?
No, I hate him.
Do you really?
I really do.
Really? Even when he's kissing Vince McMahon's backside?
Just do not like the guy. Don't know what it is. Well, I think it's his name, partly.
Really? Well, you went so William Regal's now the NXT general manager, and he's incredible. And he was a talented guy as well, a really talented guy.
I think maybe it was his smugness.
Yeah, I think as two British lads watching wrestling, he was very much playing a blue blood character. Speaks the Queen's English, and you'd hate him as much as the US fans, I think.
Yeah.
Which was great. So I mean, not just William Regal, but we're going to talk a little bit about Lance Storm as well, Christian and Tess, when they formed the Un-Americans. There were three Canadians, Lance Storm, Christian and Tess, who would later be joined by Regal in the Un-Americans. And the angle actually come less than a year than 9/11 happened. Again, that's sort of significant because it's them testing the water for what they probably did a year later as well with the Hassan angle, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. The emblem for the group was an upside-down American flag. And you know that any time you do anything out of the ordinary with the US flag, people go mental, don't they?
Oh yeah, if you slightly change your anthem, if you slightly change it,
if there's a star missing,
if there's one star missing, it's just like all hell breaks loose. That's it.
Absolutely,
it's game over. It's just like, don't do it.
So they had that, and then there was another storyline with them trying to burn the flag, which is sacrilege in America.
Oh, yeah.
At a time when America wanted possibly to hate the rest of the world, this faction comes in, Canadians and English, and it gives them someone to hate.
Give me someone to hate as well.
Yeah. All of the people involved in it was concerned with the heat it'd bring, especially with 9/11 happening so soon prior to it. They was all very nervous, apart from Regal, who was quite happy to do it, who sort of got the game that it was just a show, and that's probably why he's so successful at the minute in the work he's doing in NXT. NXT is brilliant and put on some incredible matches. Yeah. So eventually they split up as the Young Americans, and Regal and Lance Storm would continue with the anti-American heel as a tag team, and had some tag team success as well. But I think Regal had many anti-American moments, and it was mainly come from the fact that he was British, blue blood, which meant he was better than everyone else.
Yeah, he seemed to come across that way a lot, like he was better than everyone else. He thought he was better than everyone else, and it came across.
But I don't necessarily think it was anti-American. I think they might have taken it like that.
I think it was very much, I'm British.
It's a heel.
It
was a good heel, really. And I think Regal did some incredible work. So next up, we're going to talk about Mohammed Hassan.
And you kind of just touched on it then with the 9/11 and after obviously how it came across. So basically, Mohammed Hassan described himself as an Arab American wrestler, wanting to relieve from the increased prejudice and stereotypes created by the 9/11 attacks. Obviously, the 9/11 attacks in America is a very, very soft subject, and across the world, it's terrible.
Yeah.
What happened. And this, I rightly or wrongly, they kind of tried to push this character, which this is kind of what they do. They kind of step on the line of how they can take it.
I think there was real potential for this character actually to show the struggles of what people were going through in real life and it was heightened it was taken way too far. I think the original concept could have worked if they'd toned it back.
I think
quite a lot.
There's certain points where they go over the line, especially with something so to say prominent as what happened with 9/11, and they crossed the line with this one. But like you say, the country's still in mourning. It was very sore subject to start with. But it came out 2 years after the 9/11 attacks. And that's how he started. And he would end every match, with his hands outstretched and praising Allah.
Yeah.
which was stopped after WWE received multiple complaints from Muslim Americans, believe it or not.
Not just Americans,
it was, Muslim Americans as well.
Yeah. Understandably as well. Why would religion say that's okay to portray this bad guy and have his religion as part of this bad guy? It's not something. And again, it's WWF not realising that. And
I think religion in general it's a very, very sore subject for a lot of people. And
well, it's something that means so much.
It is. It means so much to so many people, and many different people interpret it different ways.
Yeah.
Hence why you have so many different religions.
Yeah.
But I think for WWE to try and push a religion, I think was
to put the religious connotations in it. You can do it mildly. I mean, the WWF have done it a few times though, with the Undertaker putting people on crosses and stuff like that. Yes. And it becomes too. If you take too much from that symbolicity,
a lot of people.
Yeah, you've got to be careful with stuff like that.
It's a fine line. And like you say, it's one of them things, isn't it? But when he entered the Royal Rumble in 2005, all the others in the Rumble at the time stopped fighting to eliminate him.
Which is how much they hated him.
Yeah, this shows the massive amount of heat he had from faces and heels. So it wasn't just the baby faces, it was all the heels going for him as well. He was very much seen as the hated one.
Yeah, I think it was Edge and someone else. It was heels at the time that went for him.
Yeah. So and on a taping of SmackDown in 2005, after Daivari, his tag partner, was defeated by The Undertaker, Hassan was at the top of the ramp with 5 masked men with ski masks and camp pants.
Yeah.
They were armed with clubs and piano wire. 3 days after this episode aired, London bombings happened.
So again, just
bad timing, too much,
too close to the bone,
too sensitive.
Way too much.
You read into what you can. Obviously, now you can discuss it, but at the time, it was a sore subject for a lot of people.
A sore subject for advertisers. You don't want to advertise something that's when such atrocities are taking place in the world. Why would you want your company to be advertised as something that's showing that? And
yeah, I think, and by this point, the WWE realised it had gone too far. And they tried to change his character, but unfortunately, it did not work for him.
Yeah, they tried to re-emphasise the point that he was an American that felt this way, and it didn't work. And the character was gone, and it was too far.
Yeah, it'd gone too far, unfortunately, for him, and because he was ultimately playing a character. But on this occasion, they took it too far. So, but yeah, it could have been an interesting angle. On an anti-American heel, but he was cut short due to advertisers not wanting it on the show. They're advertising on, like you just said, you touched off on it. So but his last moment in WWF was by taking a last ride from The Undertaker off the stage.
Yeah, never to be seen again.
Never to be seen again. What a way to go out, though, to be fair.
Pretty good way to go out.
Yeah.
I think
if I was going to go out of it, I'd be like, yeah, that can happen to me.
Well, WWE fans at the time were a bit peed off about it because he was a talented guy. After something like that's happened, and after he's been misused in a way, it was hard to get him back in, and you've lost a talent. People would have liked to have seen more of.
Yes, yeah.
So now we're going to move into a little bit more modern wrestling. First off, we're going to look a bit about Rusev and Lana, because at the minute you've got 3 top heels that are anti-American, all on SmackDown, which is a little bit weird. I think they should have probably split them up between Raw and SmackDown. Yeah. But so we've got Rusev and Lana, you've got Kevin Owens, and you've got Jinder Mahal, the current WWF champion.
Jinder.
So Rusev, first of all, Rusev's from Bulgaria. But when Rusev first went onto the main roster, he was described as a Russiophilic. That's a word I learned. Can you guess what that means?
I cannot.
It's someone who loves Russia, and he was named a hero of Russia, basically. So he'd come out with his Russian flag.
So basically, someone's just made a word up.
Possibly. There's a lot of philics, and
you get a lot of stuff like that.
Amophobia, yeah.
It's not an English dictionary, it doesn't count.
No. The problem with this gimmick was it really insulted the people of Bulgaria, because nowadays you've got things like Twitter, you've got all this sort of social media. People knew that he was from Bulgaria, and they couldn't understand as why there was being categorized as Russians, and it's things that countries get offended with.
Yeah, very much.
If I was to say to American, hello, Canadian, they'd probably just be as insulted as the Bulgarians was at the time. Later on, he'd be billed as being from Bulgaria, which he is now, of course, and his wife is from Bulgaria. However, she's not from Bulgaria. She's from Florida in real life and puts on the gimmick accent. So Rusev isn't, but it's his real life wife. They got married recently. However, in the WWE Total Divas, she drops the Russian accent as an American. So sort of blurring the lines. Total Divas is more of a sort of Keeping Up with Kardashians type show. So they drop that kayfabe, but then they keep other kayfabe. It's a bit weird that they decided.
It's a bit of an odd one how they're doing it.
But there are a couple of shocking things which happened, especially with Lana. So she dedicated a few of Rusev's wins to Vladimir Putin, which didn't go down very well with the tensions between America and Russia at the minute, which caused mainstream media attention. The Washington Post got involved. And there was even more heat when it was mentioned about Malaysia Airlines Flight 17. You've got to be careful with real life events. Sometimes it can be used well. Sometimes you're pushing things out of entertainment into reality.
And ultimately, if it's done right, it's really good. But there is a very, very fine line, and it's very easy to cross, as you can see, and it has happened on many occasions.
So he came down on a tank to WrestleMania 31, which was a brilliant image, actually. It looked great and still holds great as an image for Rusev today.
Certainly does.
And he was one of the driving factors that formed the League of Nations, which was anti-American heel-ish. It was going after Roman Reigns. That couldn't even put over Roman Reigns, though, to be perfectly honest. That was Sheamus, Wade Barrett, Alberto Del Rio, and they joined Mr. McMahon to target Roman Reigns. If that don't put you over, I don't know how the hell you put Roman Reigns over. So, that's a bit about Rusev. Next up, we're going to talk... I mean, there's not much to say about Jinder Mahal. Obviously, he's in the WWF before. He's bulked up a lot. He looks great. And he's the current WWF champion. Well, he looks like he takes steroids, even though that wouldn't happen in WWF anymore. They've brought him in... The rumours are that they've brought him in to try and get a grasp of India a little bit more, especially with the network. However, they don't think that's happening as much as they'd like to, so that's why they've brought in the Great Khali and stuff to the Punjabi prison match. We've got my sort of feeling about Jinder is that I'd love him as a champion if he wants stuck in a feud with Randy Orton, or he's just entering a feud with Shinsuke currently, but he feels like he could be a really great platform for people like Mojo Rawley, like Sami Zayn, who had programs with him to start with, but what they're actually doing is just sort of long, slow, boring championship matches. And with AJ Styles and Kevin Owens being in the US title picture at the minute, I'd love to see him bring up some of the younger guys into that. So next up, we've got Kevin Owens with his Face of America gimmick. I don't want to say too much about this because I don't think that we've seen the best of it yet. It was brought in after the Superstar shake-up.
It's got potential.
I think it's got some great potential. I think it could be one of the best anti-American heels ever if
it's done right.
With Kevin Owens being he's such a clever and so good at promos. I expect it to be very good. Like I say, I don't know why they're all on SmackDown at the minute. I think they need to split them up and put them on Raw. But that's it for our episode. Thank you very much for watching. Please like the video, comment on the video, hit us up on Facebook, join the community. We've got a great community going. Get a t-shirt if you go to patreon.com and search for Gimme a Hole.
Sorry guys.
You can get yourself a t-shirt, and I hope you've enjoyed the episode. Let us know what you think, and thank you for coming down.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Gimme a Hole. Keep it gay.